Hey guys, Marc Clebanoff here from Indie Film Ins and Outs. Welcome to episode 4 of our IFIO podcast. Today I'm going to be talking to my longtime friend and creative collaborator, Frank Krueger. Frank and I produced a movie about 10 years ago. He wrote it, produced it, was one of the stars of it. I was fortunate enough to be brought on as the director of the film. And it was also one of the first films that I used to brand myself as a sales agent. So it's a special film to both of us, but I wanted him to come on and talk about his experience transitioning from steadily working actor into producer, and what it was like actually bringing his own film to life, what it took, all the trials and tribulations and all the learnings and whatnot. So anyway, thanks again. And here is Frank Krueger. So Frank Krueger, thanks for joining episode 4 of our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, appreciate your taking the time to do this. So as I mentioned, Frank is a longtime colleague and collaborator of mine. We've made quite a few movies together. But the reason I wanted to have you do this episode was because you did basically what all of our members and people that follow us are aspiring to do, which is get your own movie made. You went from being an actor to being a producer, taking on a totally different role, diving in head first. So we're going to talk at length and in depth about what that process was, what motivated you to do it, and ultimately what came of it. And the final thing I'll say before we jump in is, as we're recording this, I got a message on Facebook that today is the 9-year anniversary of the release of our movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
9 years at the Chinese theater.
It's been a minute. But anyway, Frank Krueger, our movie was called Darkness Descends, which was retitled in the US, which we'll talk about. You were one of the lead actors, the producer, the writer, and you were gracious enough and trusting enough to let me be the director.
Yes.
So that said, tell us first kind of what motivated you from just being, a pretty steadily working actor to wanting to make your own movie, and what the initial goal was in terms of like going out and raising a budget.
Well, I think it was a lot of things. I mean, we were working together and I was watching you make your first sets of movies, and that was inspiring. At the same time, I was in a theater group and we decided to make a film collective where we would take, what we would have paid for a theater group dues, and we would put it together and make a short film every, 3 or 4 months. And that group made like 13 short films. So we started that way, learning how to get into filmmaking. So it wasn't I'm going to decide to be a producer now. It was like step by step.
Yeah, actually, as you say it, I recall you doing one of the first popular web series on the internet, even prior to YouTube's existence.
Yeah, it was 2000. I look back, it was 2006 when we went on YouTube. And honestly, the thinking back then, because YouTube was just 4 people in a room, and you could like email them your videos when it was first, before Google bought it even. And the thought there was, well, we could put it in a short film festival, or we could put it on YouTube and get like 300 views, which would be more than anybody'd see it in a film festival. And turned out we were doing a series. It was very, very just for fun and low rent, but one of them hit and got on the front page of YouTube when it still had a front page, and we got like hundreds of thousands of views, and that one went on Comedy Central, and all that came from us shooting in the backyard this series, like an actual scripted comedy series. So we were just like, oh, we'll maybe get a couple hundred people, and next thing you know, there's a couple million people that have seen it. And that was way back before everybody was even thinking web series.
Right.
In 2006. The actual idea.
Wait, it seems like YouTube's been around forever, but it's really only been around for what, like 15 years?
Yeah. 2005, 2006, somewhere like that. And then it just took off, and you could see it coming. So I was very into the digital space. We did a web series together when that was coming through from one of the films. So there's a lot of things that were coming together. There were people who were making digital series that would then be a film. So that would be a 90-minute cut, and then, 25-minute episodes. There was a couple of models that people were like Crackle were trying that way back in the days. And actually Darkness started out that way. We have scripts for 25, 5-minute episodes.
That's right. So we actually, before we made the movie, we shot part of it as a web series.
Yeah, and that was going to be the idea, is to make the web series up and then have a 90-minute cut that we can then sell. The original idea of making a feature came from Mike Elliott, who we both know. I had a lunch with him, and he was like, we were doing all these shorts, and he's like, well, why don't you do a feature? Because features you can sell. That put it in my mind, and I was in a script writing class, so I decided to, write a screenplay, and first draft and second draft, third draft, and we showed it to you, and we were making movies together, and it kind of became its own thing.
Yeah. And I can't remember exactly how long, but it was a few years that it took to get it to the point where you could actually produce it.
Yeah, I think when we started talking about it seriously, it was like 2010. So I probably wrote it in 2008, or 7 even.
Right.
It all blurs now. I can't believe how long ago that actually is, when we were making Break and Pink and all of those films.
But initially you set out to make, I don't remember.
It was a feature,
number,
yeah.
Right, but I remember we set out to raise like, significantly more money than we ended up making the movie with, definitely mid to high 6 figures.
Yeah, I think the first budget that we would come in through with a different team that kind of led to Break, when we were raising money, capital the traditional way.
Yeah.
Was, I think, $3 to $5 million was what we were going for.
Right.
And that was a whole different ball game. Like we got a poster out of it because it was, making the pitch decks, and, as anyone else says, it takes forever to do it.
Yeah.
Because, back then we were even talking about like Zoe Saldana and people, because she hadn't hit the way she hit now.
Right.
It was before even Columbiana, and, and people were pitching, oh yeah, she wants to be an action star. Like, oh really? Yeah, we didn't realize,
right. Yeah.
and it was a whole different ball game.
Yeah. And back then, like, I wasn't working in distribution yet. We were both, just kind of figuring it out as we went.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know nothing about nothing. We knew how to make a film, and, you know how to be an actor, and I knew how to be a director, but like, we really were kind of figuring it out as we went. That being said, I mean, you wrote something with a scope that, is, if you read it on paper, it seems like it should be $3 to $5 million. I mean, talk a little bit about the scope, and then once we scaled the budget way down, kind of like, where the biggest challenges were in terms of like meeting the scope to the budget. So like first kind of like set the setting of where the movie takes place, to give an idea of like, we really created an entire world from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, the whole movie was written to take place in the abandoned subway tunnels in New York City. So and the homeless population that lives there probably still lives there now, probably even more so. There's one in Las Vegas. That was the thrust of it, and to use that as sort of an action film. So it was very written with a lot of action, and fights happening under moving, subway trains, and and all of these things, and it was being pitched out as an action film to action financiers, like for that $3 to $5 million, which probably would have, now that I think about it, at that scope with stars in it, would have been too small of a budget anyway to do some of the stuff that was in that script.
But ultimately, we ended up, we're not, without getting too specific, like, we made this movie on an ultra low budget SAG contract. So that at least gives the ballpark of like, this was a low 6-figure movie.
Yeah, we ended up making it, but it was like, I turned 40. It was my 40th birthday. I'm like, I have to shoot this movie. It's been 5 years. I was spending tons of money going to, Cannes and trying to meet people, and going all these places to try and meet investors. We had shot a 5-episode web series.
Yeah, so we had a proof
based on it. So we had a proof of concept
that was actually looked really good.
Yeah, it's great.
Great showpiece.
It's still up. It's still up on YouTube, and it really worked. And it started to be like, oh, we can do it that way. Because we spent almost nothing on that initial series. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? I have X in my bank. I'll start with that. then get credit cards at 0% for 2 years and see what happens. They were still giving out that tax credit for everything
Yeah.
that you spent, federal tax credit.
Yeah, they still are.
Yeah.
The
And
Section 181. So you were able to tap that as well?
yeah, that's what ended up paying for post, to
Oh,
be
nice.
honest. So
Oh,
that
okay.
so that once I got that back because we had shot and it was everything that we shot, that tax credit, not all of it, but yeah, I think all of it we used for post. So
So you
put
actually
back
did
into the movie.
so you actually did the one thing that they tell you not to do, which is you used your own money to make a
My
movie.
own money,
I'm,
yes.
I'm
My own
sure it was
money and my own
extremely
debt.
stressful. Yeah, I'm
My,
sure it was extremely stressful, but over time it worked out. And I mean, initially there were big chunks of it that came back through distribution, and it's been kind of rediscovered and given a second wind on AVOD now. I mean, 10 years later, it's still earning money, which is great.
yeah, you have a product. I mean, and everybody, it seems crazy, but when you, even as a bit, because I'm not a businessman primarily, but when you start thinking about the business, we were, because of your help and your knowledge of doing it independently, we were able to make a project that on paper should have made way more than what it cost. And that's a good investment. And the cost of capital is at 0% for 2 years is pretty good on a credit card.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and it didn't seem as crazy a bet as it sounds now when it's coming out of my mouth, but like it is stressful because
Yeah.
I wasn't mortgaging a house or anything to do it, which people have done.
Yeah.
But it was in the Kevin Smith sell your comics and use the money to start Clerks. It was in that model of like start with that and then fill in the holes, and you start seeing when it starts to go, the budget balloons. Like, oh, I can make it for this, but then, oh, this. What about this? What about locations? What about the second person that's on art department? Or what about the third day? Oh, now we need a name, and
Yeah.
all of those things. It starts to balloon. So you budget at one thing, and and when it's your own money, this is the danger. I think this is the danger. When it's your own money, it's much easier to just keep plunking it out and plunking it out and plunking, because you got to finish your film. It's the passion project. It's a baby. So it's like, oh, you need another 10,000. Oh, find it somewhere and put it in and put it in and put it in. That's the danger. More danger because no accountability except to yourself. And if you're the one driving the boat, it's way easy to get wrapped up in spending money you don't have. And like I did get too out of control, but like I could see that danger, and you see it in people. Even with short films, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, it'll just be a couple $100,000," and the next thing you know, it's boom, 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 and 5 turns into 10, and 10 turns into 20.
Yeah. But those are some of the things you have to make the executive decision as the producer, because you're like, wait, if I hire another person on art department, it's going to cost me X per day, but it might save me another full day of production because we're going to move faster. So you got to weigh those things, and I mean, I tip my hat to you, because those are decisions I know as a producer you have to make nonstop. And on top of that, you were also playing one of the lead roles, doing everything behind the scenes. I mean, we had a more or less a proper crew, but I mean, you were location scout, you were casting director, more or less. You were, I remember you dragging in like big packages of bottled water onto set.
Yeah, I was the PA because it was my first time, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's when it's your baby project, that's what you do. You're the one who's going to pick up the stuff. You're going to come up in here, which looking back was like a gift because you learn so much. In the moment, it was like, because half of those jobs that you just mentioned, I don't know how to do. I didn't then. I had no concept of LA film and going there and getting permits. And we did it all the way down there, and insurance and all of these things. And I had no real interest in doing it. I had a real interest in getting the project done. So you end up, but now I've learned all those things.
Yeah, you learn
from mistakes, and it was, it's so cliche to say, but it was like my film school.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Every movie you learn lessons. Like there's no point where you just stop learning the lessons. But yeah, my first, like, I'd say 3 or 4 films, like that's what I consider my film school, even though I actually went to film school.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have to learn by doing. I mean, there's stuff you can learn in a book, and now seminars like this are great. But then you eventually you have to either do it or don't do it.
Right. So one thing that actually just popped into my head, I get asked questions all the time and asked for guidance on like casting. You know, casting is the eternal catch 22. Can't get money without cast, can't get cast without money. And especially on a low budget project, you know, it's tough to reel in names, and you know, it's kind of a stab in the dark as to what name is going to bring what value. Again, back then I didn't have the distribution expertise I have now, so it was like, you know, who can we get for the little bit of money we have? Talk a bit about like the casting process, not just in terms of the names, but just generally. I mean, our lead actor was a woman who, you know, we went through an extensive casting process, and if memory serves, I mean, I believe it came down to like 2 people, and then social media broke the tie.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yes, it's interesting because again, it actually
Also,
came
from an actor's perspective, like
in,
your whole life revolves around casting. So
right. And what was interesting is like, now that you say it, it came into the decision even when sort of writing the script, because we have been working, and you know that there has to be something to sell. So like, I don't want it to just be a whole movie that I'm going to put it in something.
right.
And so, and I wanted to play the part, which would be the lead. That would have been the hard part, to sell it as a 3 million. You know, then you have the Rocky story. You're trying to sell a $3 to $5 million with me, with not those credits to like, or sales to try and be the lead. So I started, you know, making it an ensemble piece on purpose, so that we could put in a really strong villain, a really strong female lead. On purpose. So it came even from the writing. It was like, okay, if I want to play this part, because this is what's personal to me, I want to make sure there's other stuff for other actors that will pull somebody with a name, or somebody with more of a experience coming in.
And that's a really smart point, because you know, I preach all the time, like the development, you know, the development starts in the writing. Like there's things to be concerned about strategically, distribution wise, you know, financially and whatnot in the writing itself. You know, if you just write arbitrarily, you know, good luck. But if you're smart about, you know, utilizing resources at your disposal, and you know, like you're talking about building an ensemble cast that's going to give you opportunities to add more value, that's very smart.
Well, and I learned it from you because of Break, actually, because it was going through that process at the same time as trying to raise the $3 million and getting the no, you can't lead a $3 million movie, blah, blah, blah. I was going to die on that rocky hill, you know, but like when we did Break, and you could see that you could make an ensemble piece and pull in name actors for other parts, then it's okay. Okay, you know what? We're going to make it a 50-50 with the good guy, bad guy, and led to interesting things, because then it, you know, more so I was pushing for the female character to be the lead, the protagonist lead. Which I think actually is good for the movie. And you know, it's still in development. We could still make a series of it, and that series would be like definitely like a female led, you know, female driven, not for its own sake, but because that character is the good, you know, Dante's Inferno character that goes in and is the audience conduit. So it helped the writing. I think sometimes these limitations help the development if you don't push up against them. If I was like, oh no, I got to be the star of the thing, and it's got to be my name on the cover and all of this other stuff, then it doesn't help, and you lose out on having a strong female lead and having a good villain, and you can spin it into something that's actually gold a lot of times. The limitations.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, that cast was very eclectic, and you know, like I said, our lead actress, I remember it came down to her and one other person, and you know, we took a look at it, and this was in the early days of social media, but even then it was like, well, this girl's got a following.
Well, so and she was also producing the exact kind of like content that the lead character in the movie was. She was an adventurer in real life. And all the funny thing about it, she was, because we did open auditions that we were both at, and she was the first appointment in the whole session, and she came early. And I just remember she was like literally the first person to show up at the audition was Kinga.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and
And
just, came out and took it. And then it did become like, oh, what about names? This, but like she was the best.
yeah, you also get a good sense of people in the casting sessions because especially on a low budget movie, like everybody really has to be a team player because it's
Mhm.
not especially us. We spent what 2.5, 3 weeks, all night shoots in a dingy
Oof.
warehouse in downtown LA.
Yeah.
And we did B-roll in New York, but like the majority of the lion's share of the movie was shot in a dingy warehouse in LA, almost entirely night shoots. So that's the type of environment that like you really have to have. Yeah, you have to check both those boxes. Like they have to be the right person for the role, but they also have to be the right person who's gonna come like be collaborative in that environment.
Yeah, I remember speaking of Kinga and give her a shout out because I remember doing an interview later, and I always was very cognizant of like that we were in a warehouse and it was tough working conditions when we had work trying to make everybody comfortable. And I always felt like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And then she in the interview said it was like the best 2 weeks she ever had. She just kind of like camped out and did the thing and had fun and liked the environment. And I had never even thought that it was a positive, but that was her attitude. She saw it
Right.
as a positive. Those are the kind of people that you want involved in a project. Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And we had to shoot the movie somewhat piecemeal because we had trouble. We knew we wanted to cast up our bad guy as kind of like the person who put in the middle for selling
mhm,
the movie. That's where the money was going to go, or not a ton of money, but like that's where if we were going to invest in an actor, that role.
mhm.
But we actually, I remember we couldn't get that actor cast in time, so we ended up shooting what like couple months later, we ended up picking all that up.
Yeah, we picked up a month. I think it was like almost a month to the day after we did our first 10 or 15 days, and then we picked up for 3 or 4 more days when we finally got that actor. So we shot all the other scenes. We didn't shoot any of the scenes that character was in. You know, I don't think like it wasn't like we just shot around that character. I think
No,
we shot all of those chunks
and the
when
way the script was written, it was good because that character was not isolated, but his environment was very separate from the majority of the rest of the movie around the protagonist. I mean, they do collide at certain points, but like the bad guy and his crew are very separate through a lot of the movie from the good guys and their crew.
Yeah, and we had the rest of the bad guy crew, so a lot of people did come back. It was really a nice other testament is that when we picked up a month later, people were, um, you know, willing to show back up and do those scenes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I mean that's how crazy I was at that moment. I was like, oh, we'll just start shooting, and we'll figure out the star when it comes. And we got close on a couple things, and finally turned out we had a 3-day window with Danny Trejo, and he
Yeah.
came in from Romania and off to someplace else, and liked the script and liked the idea of the project, and came in, was a mensch, and sat with everybody outside, and was the best in
Yeah.
terms of like I would low maintenance in terms of like a team player, like we're
Yeah.
talking
And
about.
and at that time I think he was just coming off of shooting the second Machete and like he had a
Yeah.
lot of heat at that point in time. So I remember, we did that was one of the first movies that I took out as when I was branding myself as a sales agent. I remember like calling you from the market in Europe being like, we just got offers from UK and Germany and wherever else. Like they didn't even watch the movie. But
Yeah.
like at that point in time, he was the right guy. We got very lucky with that.
Yeah. I think we came out maybe I'd have to look at the dates, but maybe 8, 9 months, 6 to 9 months after Machete 2 hit
Yeah.
hit big, hit the big.
Right. So once the movie was done, getting to the point of, delivering it, I mean, what was obviously we had a whole producer pool. It was you, myself, and several other people involved that like, were kind of a sounding board and a little committee trying to figure out the distribution play. But like, did you have a specific path for particularly the domestic distribution? Obviously I took it and I was dealing with the foreign. but what was the process once you had the movie in hand and you had something good that had value to it? Like, what was the thought process of like, okay, now I got to get this thing sold?
I'm trying to remember back what the thought process it was. And we did have producer Darren Dombro was helping setting up meetings
Yeah,
with domestic sales agents. You were covering foreign, so we had that part settled. So it was a matter of finding a domestic distributor. And
got quite a few offers too.
to be honest, we like that. Now that I think about it, we were approached more than me pitching out. I think I did pitch out Grindstone. Like I went and reached out to them and sent them the specifics. Um, you know, yeah. So once I think you have a product that makes sense and does think the distribution, there are avenues of distribution.
Sure.
Like that didn't seem to be a problem. The more problem was like trying to figure out the math of what was the best deal and who to go with and
Yeah.
deliverables.
Yeah. And back then we didn't know that you could like cut a trailer and go try to pre-sell something. We were just like, let's finish the movie, and when the movie's done, we'll take it out.
Right, and we were still at that point going to release it as a digital series and try and do like there was still in that space in 2010 where people were doing that model, and then it became, well, which do we release first? And now we have a 90-minute cut, and people seem to be responding to it. So there was a lot of moving pictures. That actually, to me, was the most stressful part because the calculus of how to like, and I did have a lot of the deals that people came in were paid after they were going to get paid after we make a sale. So it couldn't be one of these things where there was no MG because I wouldn't be able to pay the cast and crew their bonuses and things.
Oh, you know what? Actually, that's a good thing to touch on. You actually did a lot of bartering and leveraging with some of the key players on the movie to fully like get the most value out of the production. I mean, I remember with the DP, with a handful of people. So I mean, again, you don't have to get into like specific details or numbers or anything like that, but like, how integral was that to the success of the movie, like getting people in and
Well, it was funny, the crew that we had I think everybody sort of came in with that same sort of thing, like they may never see that money, and some money was money up front, but there was percentages and
there
like
were some deferrals and stuff like that.
yeah, and the actors got paid their daily rate, but then if it sold, it would get a bonus um, on selling, which that was just because I was an actor and I wanted to pay people closer to their rate, and couldn't afford to do it right that day. But it ended up like all those people got paid, got the bonuses, and that was a nice check to write when the first sale came through, because it took a big chunk of that first sale. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I remember even like our cinematographer Lon Bowie, like he had some kind of deal with Canon or whatever. I think he got the cameras for free because they were new cameras that Canon wanted to put to use and like have some showpieces, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Like, so Lon had a lot of contacts, and it was going to be him and the Bowie brothers, first feature that they shot, because they were shooting a lot of, shorts and things, and had a name. And I just met him at an event at Google, and he was like the greatest guy ever.
Yeah, he
such
was
a team player, and he brought so much to the table.
Yeah. So
we got really lucky that way with the crew.
Maybe at the time I was aware. I didn't recall that was his first feature, but like that's a big carrot to dangle. So he was clearly very skilled and had done a lot of work, but I guess the opportunity to shoot a feature like basically got us a DP that was probably above our pay grade.
Yeah, 100%. And because he was also coming from, it wasn't about the money for him right at that moment. We had a lot of people that were interested in the project. The material is solid, and you can see the thing coming together. And that's, I think, ultimately what most people make their decision on, is if they respond to the material. you know, in the end, we just to go with Danny, you go through his people and you send them the script, and they read the script, and
Sure.
then they say yes or no. So you want material that they can respond to, which also goes into the writing. You want to write characters that, if you want a star, that the star will want to play, that they haven't
Yeah.
played before, that you know has some meat to it.
Yeah.
You know.
And the movie's got a really unique look to it because like half the movie is lit by firelight because
Yeah.
it takes place, you know, in the tunnels underground where there is no natural light. So that was an interesting thing that I mean, obviously, you know, the movie was lit with a normal G&E
Oh,
package,
right.
but I mean, half that movie was literally lit by firelight.
Yeah, and that was the benefit. I try to again look to it, but you can speak more to that as the director because you had a lot of those limitations of
I mean,
where we could
I had the
shoot and all of
limitations,
those
but that
things.
really was the DP driving it. I mean, us having discussions, and I mean, it'd be like, hey, where can we get away with a trash can fire near the talent? Like that
Yeah.
would be something that actually exists in that environment, and you know, it gives us the look we want without having to actually set up lights, which is very time consuming.
Yeah, you get shooting close and doing these things, and that warehouse has been shot a lot since then. I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen it in a lot of different things, and our art department was incredible with what they did have and what they brought to the table. You know, Roger was, you know,
yeah,
just woof. You know,
yeah,
what he was able to like create. I mean, we have that subway scene where there's a subway passing and the lights are going, and you know there's tracks, and you would think it was shot in a subway tunnel with
right,
Lewis there. And you know, I watch it now, I'm like, how the hell did we do that? I don't
right.
I don't even remember how we did that.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know?
mean there were definitely some tricks that were pulled off. I mean, most people would never guess the real budget if you know just by watching it because again the scope is very grand and the cast is large and the you know we did a good job like you know you guys going to New York and shooting all the B-roll of the trains and everything and like splicing that together so gracefully with what we shot in LA. And I mean, yeah, most people would never guess. I don't think there's a commentary on that film, but there should be.
Yeah, we should have done one. We should maybe
Yeah,
we'll do one and put it on a re-release, the 10-year re-release.
yeah. So when you were done with the film, did you? I mean, obviously you had like credit cards and stuff that you had to pay. You had to you know pay talent and stuff like that. Were you just like right out the gate, like let's sell it, sell it, sell it, or did you? I'm trying to remember. I remember doing a couple festival screenings, but were festivals a big target? And if so, did you get anything out of that?
They weren't a big target. We did action on film, and you know, but that's why I found like that was my personal stress, but that's because I had my money tied up in it. So I
Yeah,
like it became more of a conversation than I wish it would have been, you know, because
yeah,
and we were getting attention to for domestic distribution. So like it kind of jumped over. We didn't have to do the festival market to get the attention. It was
right.
getting the attention off of the talent's name, and you know AFM. It was getting attention.
Yeah,
You know, it was a good package. We had a good poster. We had a good thing. A lot of that was help for having you on the producing staff because you were getting into distribution then, and you did have like ideas, and we were all sort of that was all happening at the same time.
yeah.
You know? So
So I actually use this movie as an example in some of my coursework when I'm talking about like the importance of marketing materials and key art. And one of my favorite things to do is the side by side comparison of the two different versions of key art on this movie. Now in the U.S., our domestic distributor, Vertical Entertainment, like you know, there's no such thing as a perfect distribution scenario, but they've been a pretty good partner. I think you
yeah,
would agree.
no,
They
I
you
love
know
Vertical.
they
Yeah,
they
they're
got us
great.
the Redbox deal, they got us the Netflix deal, like they got that movie everywhere. But for you having being the creative driver on the project and like you have your whole heart in it, your whole bank account in it, like everything in it. What was it like and how much pushback did you do when they came to you basically and was like, we're going to change the look of it in terms of the key art. We're going to change the title. I mean, were those really bitter pills to swallow or?
Yes, they were, and most that was one of the times where I was getting very myopic about it, and I have to say that you know, in the end, I don't love all about it, but where they write about like 20 Feet Below being the title so that it's the first on the thing, it's on Peacock right now and it's on the first couple of pages because it's got a number up there. Those kind of things when you're selling a film,
Yeah.
but I'm not coming from the sales perspective, then you see that these people, they know what they're doing in those
Right.
terms. And they knew how to sell Danny and they were leaning into that. My concern was it wasn't kind of the film that we made, you
Yeah.
know, it wasn't that, but that is what sells, you know.
Yeah.
And I have a picture from Redbox. It was Hunger Games and us, and something with, you know, Danny
Yeah, I
Ratcliffe.
remember it was
And
12 years
it
a
like
slave and
so.
20 feet below.
Yeah, in the end, it was like when you're putting those posters up, you're like, okay, I see what that's about, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And fortunately, we were more or less able to maintain the integrity of your vision in the foreign, because in the US it's 20 feet below and it's got, you know, Danny holding the axe with the flames and whatever,
yeah,
but like everywhere else in the world it's branded exactly how we wanted it,
yeah. Hmm.
which is cool.
Um, yeah, and I mean, when you see it, it's always interesting to see because you see the DVD cover from Japan and it has its own feel.
Right.
And then you have like, so there's the American version, which seems like an American version. And then you have the UK version, which seems like a UK version.
Right.
I mean, I think now looking back, I'm like, well, we were making the UK version. We were making a European style. You know, the action, it became more of a like commentary drama with some action in it as opposed to an action slasher horror piece, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's
Um,
true.
which it could very well have been. We could have made that movie, but that's not the movie we ended up making. You know,
Uh-huh.
you can
Yeah.
make a slasher movie in the subway tunnels. I mean, I think they did Slaughterhouse Trainers.
Yeah.
Um,
So going back to the distribution real quick, you know, when you had like Lionsgate and Vertical and a few of these other companies courting you, I remember there were at least 3 or 4 that were like pretty aggressively coming after the movie. Now, most of the time, filmmakers have a sales agent having those conversations for them.
mhm.
In your case, you actually dealt directly with those distributors.
Yeah.
So what was that process like? And was it really daunting and overwhelming or confusing, or
It
like, I mean,
was,
dealing with those big companies that can just mow you over if they want to?
um,
Not mow you
it
over,
was,
but they can bully you for sure.
well, and that's part of also why it was the most stressful part was that, you know, in the sense of I was felt at that moment so out of the water because you're sitting in big tables at conference room tables and they're throwing this and doing math and oh, what about this and what about that and this percentage and that percentage and you know, bigger MG, less MG but more percentage on the back end, and then people are telling you, well, you don't see you don't see overages, so the percentage doesn't matter, but they're saying no, we can hear and get here. They want a global deal. I don't want a global deal because you were handling the foreign. So it was like, and you're trying to do all that math in your head while you're talking. And I've never done it before, to be honest. I mean, I thought, you know, Grindstone was like, they were super great. And when it came down to is when I saw like the deliverables package, it was so intimidating to me. And that, you know, that was what scared me is illegal
Yeah, I don't blame
deliverables.
you. People say they want that. People say all the time, you know, get me a Grindstone deal, which is, you know, if you're not familiar with Grindstone, it's one of Lionsgate's non-theatrical brands. And it's like, you know, I have to tell most people you can't deliver to Lionsgate. I mean, the delivery, the technical and the legal delivery process to actually deliver your film to them is so over the top. And I think they do it that way because I would imagine that somewhat frequently they end up not paying out the MG that they're contractually committed to, because it says in the contract you have a deadline to deliver, and if you don't deliver gracefully by that deadline, they will hold back the MG.
And that's something people need to. That's not exclusive to Grindstone. That's the business.
No, not at all.
I remember being somewhere with a person who was a lawyer from some other distribution company, and you know their thing is, oh, if you don't deliver by this date, then we own the film and we don't have to pay you, and that's it. And what you come down, especially if you're an independent filmmaker, you know, the paper is one thing, but if you can't go to court to like, you know, if you can't now afford to go to court for
Yeah.
$600 an hour for a lawyer for 2.5 months to try and, then it doesn't really matter. you know, I know that sounds bad, but like if they say, okay, go ahead, sue us for the money, you know,
They know
vertical,
you're not going.
vertical didn't do that. But like what I'm saying is like we got lucky, like, but there are conversations like that where like, okay, well, you may be right, you may be wrong. Let's go to court. They have the money and you don't. Okay, you're screwed because you can't go. Um, and that's something I think is lost on people to an extent. That was a big lesson I learned. It's like, okay, you can have all the paper you want, but if you can't enforce it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying don't get the paper. Do get the paper,
Yeah, absolutely.
but like you have to know that that's the case. It's like, I mean, and that's not. I mean, that's one of the. You know, I heard that Mel Gibson had a similar problem with like the Passion of the Christ because he was going out four walling, what they call going out independently, and then trying to get the money from the theater chains. And theater chains, you know, I don't know which one it was, but one of them has this like a standing thing. Is like we don't pay until they sue us.
Hmm.
That's literally like their standing orders. We don't pay. But when you're Disney or you're a big company, then you say, okay, well, you don't want to pay for this, then we're not giving you Star Wars. You don't want to pay for
Yeah.
that, you don't get Ant-Man. That's how the deal is done. But if you're
But a lot
coming
of
out
those
four
companies,
walling just
yeah,
on your own with
a
your
lot of
butt.
those companies play dirty like that. I mean, I have a friend who owns a piece of a show she was on, and I mean, she said literally is like, I have to go audit them, go spend 10 grand and audit the studio because the studio claims they're always in the red. And then
Uh-huh.
she goes, you know, I got to go audit them every other year, spend 10 grand, but then a giant check shows up.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of the some of those big companies, they have the muscle to be able to do that to the smaller people. So
And I'm not saying that Grindstone does that. I'm just saying they have it legal out so much. So you have to have your act together. Now I would feel more
yeah,
comfortable going to Grindstone because I have those legal deliverables and I start putting COE, you know, certificate of engagements in with the packet. If I, when the second movie I produced for someone else, I'm like, well, we're going to get this COE right off the bat from
yep,
everybody, all the
yep,
department heads. Then when you sign it in the beginning, then you know what? Okay, as you're producing, you just check off that list. If you could get a copy of legal deliverables from one of these places and just make sure you have that paperwork, which is chain of title for, you know, I wrote it myself, so I had to sell it to my own company to set and write all that paperwork.
yeah, yeah,
Then it
yeah.
becomes it's.
Contracts on everybody who touches the movie. Then
Mhm.
I've even had to do proofs of payment where we show proof that you know, certain key crew members have been paid and whatnot.
Yeah, and that is one of those things that's all easier up front once you know it. Once you get a
Yeah,
list, it's easier to just put in a packet all of the things that you need to sign, which is why when you go on a big studio set, that's what they do. They give you a whole packet, you sign everything, it goes to legal, and then it's done.
yeah, yeah, that's right. So,
Um,
you know, we're talking about it, you know, 9 years out now, 10 years out from whenever we shot it, but it's like, you know, in the long run, this movie was successful and continues to be. But I think you'll agree it was anything but a smooth road. I mean, we had challenges to get it made. We had challenges, huge challenges during production. We had huge challenges in distribution. We had challenges across the board. But having gone through all that, you know, did it leave like a bad taste in your mouth about producing, or is it something that, you know, given the right project, you would jump in and do again?
um,
Especially knowing now what you know, uh, knowing now what you know from doing the first project.
yeah, it took me a long time, and you sort of have to guide what it's funny that we say it is successful when you go for that kind of film and you have the thing and it's still on Peacock as we speak right now and it's on
And
Freevee and
Tubi and
and
yeah,
people can watch it whenever they want. And nowadays people can, you know, grab these movies and, you know, watch today. So go ahead and watch, everybody who's watching
yeah.
this. Go
Well,
grab.
I'll pin the trailer on the end of this episode so people know what to look for.
But yeah, it was successful when you hear it like that. But it took me a long time to think of it that way because it was so much of a grind. And I think I could have changed my attitude faster. Been like, okay, look at the positive. Look at the positive. The thing I don't think I would ever do now, and I can't really anyway, is put my own money in because I did produce a film for someone else that had a budget, and then you know I could
Right.
do the paperwork and go through the thing, and that was a much more relaxed experience. We had the budget that we had, and
Yep.
we made it work, and you go and do the thing. So that I would do again. Um,
Yeah, it's easier to be unemotional about other people's money.
Yeah. And this is when I was one that like you push for it, and I want to. Ironically, I still want to like do something with the IP somewhere down the line. Um, so if I found another story like that, I would do it again. But
Yeah.
yeah, it takes a lot to do it that way.
Yeah.
You know, and I think nowadays it's a different environment. People people can make content,
Yeah.
film, not easier, but like it just is. Well, yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's much more tangible for sure. But I
Yeah.
mean, look, that movie was made at a very good time because it was
Mhm.
still kind of the end of the DVD era where there was still some money
Yeah.
to be made. We were still getting like decent MGs overseas.
Yeah.
Now the fact that, it kind of went flat and I wouldn't say stagnant, but it kind of went flat for a little while there because it wasn't a new film. And then all of a sudden now like Tubi and Peacock and
Hmm.
these big AVOD streamers have given it a whole second wind.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful time for film. Like it was nice for us to get the MGs, but it's a beautiful time now because there is life to old movies. Like I've done it myself, where I see somebody will pull a scene from put it on TikTok, so from some Adrian Brody movie from 2012 or
Right.
whatever, and then I'll go and find it on the and watch it. I'm like, oh, that's a great
Yeah.
film. How did I miss that? And so all of these things that might have only been released overseas, for all I know, you know, then
Yeah.
they might not have had a theatrical release. People can find again,
Yeah.
it, and I don't know that the audience now cares. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think so
distributors.
either. It's like even with the foreign, like a couple years ago, out of the blue, like we did a TV license in Latin America, and then we got a Spanish dub. So now it's going on Tubi in
Yeah,
Spanish, and now it's going to go into Africa for the first time, like 10 years later. But
yeah,
like with AVOD, the streamers, because it's so volume driven, they just need to like populate their sites with titles, and as long as it's a good looking movie, they don't care when it was made.
yeah. And then it has to stand on its own 2 feet, which is
Right.
why when it comes back down to it, it has to be about story, and it's going to be, you know, it has to be, it's going to be about story, or it has to say something. I mean, if it's written just for the bucks, then that's a tough road
Yeah.
to hoe sometimes,
Yeah.
I find. But yeah, absolutely, everything can have new life now. And I just, it made me think when you were just talking. It was like, yeah, yesterday at the cigar shop, Mo was watching Red Dawn, 1984,
Mhm.
1986.
Good movie.
Movie holds up. I was watching
Yeah.
it like, oh my god, it's a great movie. Now, for a new audience who was born in 2001 or 2019, you watch that movie, you don't need a remake. You just watch that movie. They're going to be
Yeah.
responded to. I went and saw Titanic, the re-release, and the teenage girls in the back were giggling and sighing about Leo the same way they were when I went to see it when I was 12 years old. It's like it's like
You weren't 12 years old when that came
well,
out.
whatever it was, yeah, 20, whatever. So yeah, all right, you're aging me. You're right.
Yeah.
That's true.
No,
Yeah, I was in my 20s.
I was
But
gonna
either
say I
way,
was in high school.
but yeah, I was in my 20s. But either way, like the reaction is the same, and I think now we can see that it's like the age doesn't matter if it's a good story. I mean, you
Yeah, it's
might as
true.
well watch The Godfather again. Who doesn't want to watch The Godfather? 1970, whatever.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
1976.
Yeah. So looking back, what's more or less a decade later, do you feel like, especially given the fact that you had to produce the movie on a far lower budget, more restricted budget than you had intended when you wrote it, do you feel like you more or less accomplished what you set out to accomplish?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel like we did. I feel like what we like. You always want a bigger budget. There are always shots that you
Sure.
want to go back in, or things that you wish could have been done. I do still want to do that fight underneath a moving, you know,
Yeah.
train,
Well,
which was in
we
there,
didn't end up
which was
doing a
in the
fight
script. We
under.
just there's
Yeah,
no way
we didn't end up doing a fight underneath a moving train, but we did do a fight with a
with
moving
the
train
new
moving
chick
through it.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. So we got as close as we could possibly get.
Yeah.
But there's always those things, and um, like I said, I'm just obsessed with story and that world and stuff. So I want to do more with it in that term, but more in a TV realm, more in a series realm. But for that film, yeah, like I think we, when you look back, it's hard to see when you're in it, but just like I said, to be up next to Hunger Games, and that's what you also have to realize is like people who are going to Redbox, they see Hunger Games, they see us. If they get us, they don't know that it was made for like the catering budget of the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
It does, yeah, it's a movie. And that's like an amazing thing, you know?
Well, I remember when we made Break and we released it in some theaters, and I remember getting like a bad review in the LA Weekly or something. And the girlfriend at the time, who was a publicist, was saying to me, she's like, you're missing the point. The point isn't that you're getting a bad review. The point is that your movie is being reviewed next to these giant studio movies that are also getting bad reviews.
Right.
You know? It's visibility.
And I mean, look, half the people hate everything, so you can't even go by any of that. So what you got to do is, put your mark. And as a learning experience, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I learned so much that I could put into, so much that I don't even know I could put it into the book. You're doing all of these podcasts and things, and you see how much information there is and how much, there is to learn, which is what's great that you can do this kind of thing. For people, because you try to tell people, it's like the amount that I didn't know when I started was, immeasurable. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. They didn't have podcasts like this at that time. You learn by just doing it.
Well, I salute you. You put your money where your mouth is. You made it happen, and that's you literally accomplished what like everybody that is involved in our program is working on doing themselves.
Well, I do want to say we made it happen, and because it couldn't have happened without you being an integral part in it. So
yeah, and I appreciate that, and it's a project I'm proud of, so and obviously I learned a lot making that movie, and but whatever, we'll be doing a lot more, I'm sure. In fact, we're working on a TV show together, which you're also a producer on.
Yes.
Showed up to set, hit it out of the park on camera, and then off camera you were like helping do SAG paperwork and all sorts of nonsense. So you're a soldier, and you always show up to set with humility, which I appreciate. And thanks for doing this.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, my friend.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks again. Bye. All right, guys, once again, thanks for joining us. I hope you got a lot out of that discussion. I'm going to tag the trailer to 20 Feet Below, Darkness Descending onto the end of this video so you can check it out. Feel free to check it out on the streamers if you want to have a look at the movie that we're actually talking about. Thanks again. Marc Clebanoff here from Indie Film Ins and Outs, and I will see you on the next one.
Where am I? You letting me go?
I'm letting you fight.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
I am God.
Look, I don't want to bother you, but I'm doing a film about life in the tunnels, and I hear you're a cop.
You want the cop? You want the cop?
I'm looking for someone named Angel.
Welcome to my world. Our moment. Our time. We've carved our bodies with our own will. Fortified our spirit. We know what honor means. In blood, we become chosen. The revolution is coming. I'm not letting him get away with this.
We're doing a sweep.
You really are crazy, aren't you? You think you're gonna take down this entire city by yourself?
Oh my god.
It starts now.
Armstrong!
can't see it. You can't see it. They're behind you.